This chocolate sourdough has been my #1 bestseller at farmers markets and my most requested recipe. We're going to start with 150 grams of active starter, and to that we'll add 385 grams of milk. I'm using almond milk. You could use whatever kind you like, and I did warm it up slightly. To this we'll add 50 grams of sugar and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. We'll stir those to kind of dissolve that starter and then set that bowl aside for a minute. In a new bowl, add 450 grams of all-purpose flour and 50 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. We'll go ahead and add our 9 grams of sea salt and a tablespoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ginger, and a teaspoon of cardamom. Now I like my hot chocolate with a little bit of heat in it, so I'm taking some chili de arbol and I'm going to grind that in my little thrift store coffee grinder. And a little goes a long way, so 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon, and then mix everything together. Just want to make sure that cocoa powder is evenly dispersed. Now I'll add the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. And I'm using a dough whisk to combine those. You could use your hands. You just want to make sure that everything is nice and moist and your dough should kind of come together into a ball. We'll cover that and let it rest for about 30 minutes. It's time to do our first stretch and fold, but first I'm going to add 150 grams of chocolate chips. These are semi-sweet. With moist hands, I'm going to start my stretch and folds. This dough is pretty stiff compared to most, so just do your best. My first stretch and fold, I do more rounds than I normally would because I'm trying to make sure that all those chocolate chips get evenly dispersed. We'll cover this again and let it sit for another 30 minutes. About every 30 minutes, we'll do a series of stretch and folds. After the first 2 or 3 stretch and folds, you can start doing these every hour. And I do a total of 4. And after the last one, we'll do a bulk ferment. Mine took about 4 hours. So after that bulk ferment, I shape my loaf. So I'm just dumping it out onto a clean, dry countertop. Like I said, this dough is pretty firm. I do try to stretch it out a little bit into a rectangle and then do kind of a lacing fold. Trying to save all those chocolate chips. And then I roll up that dough into a bowl and then do a little bit more shaping. Just trying to pull that skin tight on top and get it nice and shaped. I use rice flour for dusting. Rice flour tends to work really well to keep things from sticking without changing the hydration of the loaf. So a nice dusting there, and then I'm going to dust my banneton. If you don't have a banneton, this does work in a mixing bowl. Just make sure that your loaf is nicely dusted. I'll place this in the banneton, smooth side down, add a little bit more rice flour, and then I place this in a bag, and this is going to go into the fridge overnight. So it'll be a nice long fermentation. The dough will come out even more firm, very easy to handle. I use my parchment paper and invert the boule on top. In the meantime, my Dutch oven has been inside the oven preheating at 500 degrees for about 40 minutes. It'll depend, your oven will determine how long your Dutch oven needs to preheat. Mine takes a while. Using a razor or a lame to just score my bread. That bread will carefully be placed into a really hot Dutch oven. And I do spray this with water. You could add some ice cubes underneath the parchment paper, but I do about 12 sprays of water on top of the dough before I put it in the oven to create some steam. It'll bake for about 45 minutes with the lid on the whole time. I prefer a softer crust, and that helps that crust stay nice and soft without getting burnt. Obviously, you want to try to let that bread cool for at least an hour before you cut it. And you'll notice how soft this bread is. That's from using milk instead of water. You are more than welcome to use water instead, or a 50-50 blend, whatever you want to do to reach that 385 grams of milk. You could replace, like I said, with water. It'll make a much firmer bread. I like this because it's really soft and almost cake-like. It's fantastic toasted, and I think you're really going to enjoy this.